Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Squeak Squad. In the last row we finished off our duties over in World 7 Secret Sea, and now we're back in the final world, Gamble Galaxy, now that we've not only unlocked the Copy Ability Museum, but also Ghost Kirby. Ghost Kirby does one thing. By attacking enemies, you possess them and can then use their movesets to your advantage, and their health bar is counted as an entirely separate thing from yours. In the right hands, Ghost is honestly really ridiculous. The only thing is you can't control most mini-boss adjacent fights, so they do, I believe, have coding to have their abilities work, it's just that you actively can't use it on them in-game. This is a fun as hell reward. That's really fun just to kind of go back and see what you can experiment with, what you can get done in certain levels if you were missing certain chests ahead of time. I don't think I've ever had a playthrough where I was missing any notable chests by the time I unlocked this thing, but if you somehow only grab the chests that have, say, the seals, the vitality pieces, and the ghost metal pieces, you could be in for a fun time. Now, the thing is with Ghost, though, if you don't have the Copy Ability Museum like we showed off last time, to get Ghost as an ability, you need to defeat and swallow the Tadon mini-boss that the ghost metal inherently spawns in. You can find them in 1-3, 3-2, 4-4, 6-4, and 8-1, I believe, specifically. So there's none of them in Nature Notch, Vocal Volcano, or Secret Sea. The big thing to worry about, though, with Ghost is that while it's fun just for going through stages with it, you need to make sure you have an enemy possessed before going into a mini-boss, because you can't possess them or damage them otherwise outside of ejecting the ghost ability and then swallowing the star and spinning it back out at them for some amount of damage. I want to say, technically speaking, like, from my research before the LP, the spat-out stars in this that enemies and such can spawn is like 40 damage, which I think the only attack off the top of my head that gets close to being that kind of damage consistently is like the fully charged UFO beam. Most copy ability attacks technically do less than that, but that's also because usually you have to wait for the stars to come in. You can do as much damage as one of those will have within a short amount of time with a single combo a lot of other copy ability attacks. Heck, often 2 or 3 times as much depending on what attack you're using, what boss you're fighting, and all that. Like with Sword, spamming the crouching strike can do a lot of damage pretty quickly to a lot of fights, assuming they're grounded in any way that can actually damage them. Now, we got a majority of, like, the last big treasures last time here in Gamble Galaxy, but if you're paying attention, we are currently at 115 out of 100 treasure chests. Technically 116, counting the one on the bottom screen right now. You want to make sure you finish this stage with 118 out of the 120 treasure chests, as both of the last chests in the game are gained by defeating the final boss. And I'll talk more about what those are in specific after we do so, though you can make a pretty good estimate that one of them is probably another boss fight trophy that we need in order to access a specific mode. Ooh, also, hearing this part of the song reminds me, this might be my overall favorite song in the game. The Gamble Galaxy main theme is equal parts beautiful, but also really determined in a way I enjoy. It does remind me a little bit of, I think it was a song from Cybernator off the top of my head is where my brain immediately goes. And it's largely in the symphonic section that kind of is at the end of the song before the loop. I might be thinking of a different Super Nintendo game even now that I think about it, but I just love that section of the song so much. UFO goes Bert! Can you tell why UFO is really powerful in basically every game it's in? You get to move fast, you can move while attacking. It's just an all-in-all good bet, plus you can also destroy iron blocks with it like so in order to access our next treasure chest. Now, if memory serves, I actively do grab this chair, but worth noting, you don't get to see it too often. But if you try to exhale a bubble from the bottom screen while you have a power-up, they actively do have a sprite for every power being inflated. And you don't really get to see them too much otherwise because most of the power-ups you're not really inhaling anymore. It's a nice little detail, though I honestly really find the one that UFO has really funny, if only because you just become a little light bulb almost. And for our final main Squeak encounter in the game, it's time for a full-out brawl against Doc, 2 extra UFO enemies along the way, which makes this notably even easier. But that's a little bit of a rare distinction you get to see there. Whenever you're fighting a Squeak and they damage you, you do get a chest knocked out of you, but that only happens if it's one of the main Squeaks or the little Squeaker enemies. If a standard enemy hits you, you don't get a chest knocked out of you like you can see there with the UFO enemies that hit me a moment ago. Fun little distinction there that doesn't really get to come up too often since 95% of the time you're fighting a Squeak member. The little guys are around as well. So for getting the 3 chests in this stage, we max out our health as well, and we're well on our way to finishing off the game now. Time for us to head after the final boss, but before I do that, I not only want to showcase how our collection's looking, but I'm also going to head back to the Copyability Museum to get some specific ones that I know are really good for the upcoming boss fights. I think I already briefly mentioned what the good ones are for it last time, but in specific, you're going to want things like UFO, an elemental sword can be good, but I didn't use them overall. High jump is especially really good for this end game. I'd argue it's potentially the best use of high jump in a final boss in the series off the top of my head. Largely things that can keep you pretty airborne are pretty good as well. Things like Cupid, albeit to a lesser extent than, say, high jump or UFO. My biggest recommendation otherwise would be to bring in abilities that are projectile-based, like cutter or laser or anything like that. Don't try to use things that keep you in one place like the breath attacks as well. Those are useful in some boss fights and even some endgame boss fights. In this game, it's not really going to be worth it just due to how the final boss actually works. And also, if I haven't been super clear about this throughout the LP, it's just generally a good idea to have at least one of your inventory spots be taken up by a healing item. In fact, if anything, it might be worth having 2 max tomatoes going into this fight. As since you're not going to be collecting treasure chests anyway, you might as well use your 5 slots rather, for healing items that can keep you alive even longer. Mind you, there's also still the recommended powers they give you right before the boss fight itself, but even then, it's good to plan ahead. Let's see, Parasol, Cutter's good for this, Random is just random in general. Let's start off the final boss with Phase 1 against Dark Daroach, whose main attacks are very similar to the ones he did in the fight at the end of World 6. Just, he's more powerful, he teleports more quickly, and he's more aggressive as well. Main changes are, say, his bombs now leave a gigantic lingering fire effect that lasts for several seconds. His ice beam is much wider, so you need to be a lot more on the ball about dodging it. And I think he can throw 2 sets of stars in a row rather than just 1 this time around. We saw how good high jump was against Daroach back in World 6, and that still largely applies here. The big thing you really need to try to do with it is aim yourself towards the middle of his hitbox, because then you can get upwards of 3 or 4 hits in at a time rather than just 1. Plus, it gets you out of the way of a majority of his attacks if you're in the middle of the attack. With that said, if you lose it, you might kind of be out of luck for really good attacks or getting out of the way. But in that regard, hey, you can just exit and re-enter the Copyability Museum to have more than one version of the ability. That's a dark copy star. Hey, you big drip, where are you going? Well, time for the actual endgame. We saw that he was possessed already. Time to go after whatever's causing actually all this. And in doing so, we can gain access to Daroach's triple star rod, which is just 3 stars you can throw out at any point in time. It doesn't really do anything super standout compared to, say, like the Dream Rod or anything like that, or the Master Sword ability back in Amazing Mirror. But not for nothing, it's pretty good at comboing bosses. If you were paying attention in the Copy Museum, you may have noticed there's this little arch near the exit that has nothing beneath it. That actively is where the triple star rod gets placed after completing the game. So, in a bit of a weird moment for a final boss here, we actively do get a chase sequence where we're chasing this Dark Star all the way towards the actual final boss arena. And this actively leads to something a little funny in a mode we'll talk about in a few moments, where you actively are forced to do this again, technically. Here we go into Phase 2 of the final boss, of technically 3 if you count the chase we just did. The entity within the chest that we've been chasing the entire game since DDD's castle even is Dark Nebula. A lot of what Dark Nebula is going to be doing is firing stars out of its eye, either in a wave along the ground or from above you in a couple different patterns. But notably, it also has 3 distinct forms it's going to swap between that give it unique attacks on top of a new physical attack. There's a fire one, an ice one, and an electric one. The fire one's ability, I believe, is setting the ground on fire that you can then use to light yourself on fire should you want to. And it can dash around to do a physical attack. There's one that's ice, where it can send a beam directly from its eye that can freeze the ground. And I believe it moves in a circle for its physical movement attack. And then there's the electric one here, which can send electricity to the corners while also moving around in a wave formation up and down. Worth noting, ice and fire type attacks can damage those types of Dark Nebula, but electric type attacks cannot damage electric Dark Nebula. There can frankly be a lot of projectiles being thrown around in this fight, but because Dark Nebula themselves doesn't animate too much and often leaves themselves open for damage, they're far from the hardest final boss in the series. I'd say they're on the easier end of the spectrum that Kirby final bosses have been over the years. The treasure chest was the prison of Dark Nebula, ruler of the underworld. Meta Knight knew the secret of the chest. He fought Kirby to prevent Dark Nebula from being released. The Squeaks decided to look elsewhere for treasure. They've left for parts unknown. It looks like peace will return to the land. But where did that slice of strawberry shortcake disappear to? Thoughts of that lost snack fill Kirby's head as he goes home. The end. And that's Kirby Squeak Squad, mostly. We're actively going to showcase a couple of things after the credits, because there's not 10 minutes of credits in this game. This is a really neat little game. I do think I generally prefer a lot of the other Kirby games on the GBA and DS era. So in a lot of regards, me dropping off the series for a good bit after this, or at least dropping off getting the game soon after release, kind of makes sense. Because the platforming here is solid, and I really do like the Squeaks as a mechanic on a per-stage basis, because they lead to a lot of interesting little scenarios for you to actually catch up with them and get the chests. But the platforming outside of that, even by Kirby standards, I think is a little bit just on the standard side. Nothing really stands out too much. Which in a way does make me a little bit sad that Flagship, which ultimately worked on a lot of some of my favorite games ever, did kind of go out with a game that's just okay. But at the same time, they didn't really ever make a truly bad game, at the least. When we next cover Kirby, we're probably going to leap backwards to the N64 title just so I can take care of that before moving on to the 2.5D adjacent entries the series had moving on after this. Or I might just say, screw it, let's do the weird one and do Canvas Curse, because that's another one I played a lot on my early DS period. So for right now, let's talk about a little bit of an elephant in the room, the two missing treasure chests we didn't have going into the final level. One of them you can reasonably figure out what it's going to be. It's the boss statue needed to unlock an extra mode that all the other bosses have given us. Number 120, though, is a little more interesting in that you do get it no matter what for clearing the final stage there, but they don't immediately tell you what it is, which we'll see what that is at the end of the credits. On that note, let's talk about this game's extra mode, which is a bit of a tradition dating back to the original Kirby, Dreamland even. Extra mode in this game is unlocked after collecting every one of the 100 treasure chests in the game. It's effectively time attack. You are challenged to complete every stage in the campaign and get every treasure chest as quickly as you can. There's even a timer on screen to showcase how long you're taking to do so. Worth noting, you can tackle any of the 8 worlds in any order in extra mode, but you still have to unlock the levels in sequence within that world, so you could say maybe take care of all of Gamble Galaxy before you do anything in Cushy Cloud. It's the only thing I'm not showcasing in this LP though, because you don't notably get anything for doing it, even compared to one of the other modes I do briefly showcase coming up here. A short while later, a delectable strawberry shortcake arrives for Kirby from the Squeaks. Perhaps it's an apology for all the trouble they caused. But Kirby doesn't really care why they sent it. It's snack time. With shortcake waiting to be munched, Kirby is truly happy at last. The end. Really? The strawberry shortcake is actively treasure chest number 120. You can even take a look at a full, more expanded version of its sprite on the menu moving forward. So upon getting this, if you've collected every other chest in the game, congrats, you now have access to extra mode, which like I just said, we're not going to showcase because it's effectively just time attack. Which there is something admittedly fun about a Kirby time attack, considering how nailed in the mechanics are to begin with, where it's just you executing the controls really well, and that does feel satisfying, but for the purposes of the LP, not really something I feel is necessary to show off. Unlike all of the other side modes where there's something a little bit new to talk about. Like, for instance, beating all the bosses gets you sudden death boss endurance, so effectively this game's equivalent to the arena. There's the oddly really delicious looking strawberry shortcake sprite. I don't know why. Specifically something about the red they use in the whipped cream there is just amazing looking. And there's the extra mode 100% screen. So from here, we're going to go take a look at the sub-games available on the main menu, as I've done this in a lot of my other Kirby LPs, might as well keep doing it here. This is where you can select extra mode for one thing, but I'm not really doing that. The sub-games, as with prior Kirby games, are just little mini-games they have there for the fun of it and the aesthetics of it. You can play it either with yourself, single cart, or with other characters via DS download play. Speedy Tea Time, eat lots of cake. This is a reaction-based minigame where you wait for the tray to be lifted and tap the cakes to eat them before Storo does. Whoever fills their meter first wins. With that said, when the tray lifts, you shouldn't just tap willy-nilly everything you see. You should actually take a second to read what the actual sprites are, because some of the cakes have bombs. Eating a bomb cake stuns you and I think makes you lose a point or so as well. Like with prior Kirby games, there are difficulty levels for each minigame. What happens in this minigame as you get higher in difficulty is that Storo's reaction time gets faster in general, but also he gets a lot less likely to accidentally eat a bomb cake along the way. The reaction time-based minigames in Kirby have always been weirdly strict, especially at the top of the line difficulty for them, to the point where even as a kid, when my reaction time was weirdly at its peak in very specific regards, I had trouble with them. And while my reactions, I think, are more reasoned nowadays, the pure reaction time definitely isn't what it was when I was younger. Next up, let's talk about Smash Ride. If you played Smash Brothers on the 3DS, this is going to look really familiar. It's also very adjacent to Kirby Air Ride in general. In this minigame, you move by sliding the stylus along Kirby on the bottom screen in a specific direction, but if you tap and hold Kirby before doing so, you'll slowly charge up a smash attack, basically right out of Smash Brothers. Your goal is to smash Spinny or the other Squeakers off the arena to gain points. Whoever has the most points at the end of the round wins. This is easily, by the way, the most fun minigame to play with friends, which is probably why it, A, became the basis for that one minigame in Smash Brothers on 3DS, but also why it came back and returned to Dreamland Deluxe on the Switch. This one's just chaotic fun with friends. If you can get some buddies together, it's really fun just hearing everyone go ah a lot as they miss a shot and all that. I believe as the difficulty increases on this one, the aggression just really starts being amped up, on top of there being more enemies for you to dodge around while also take out to get more points. The third minigame is probably my least favorite, at least with how I was playing this game. This is Treasure Shot. This is the one themed around Doc. You are throwing balls towards treasure chests to grab the food that's within them. This is another reaction-based one, but the thing I've always found annoying about it is you specifically have to slide your stylus, I believe, along the arrows on the bottom screen, and something about that has always just felt uncomfortable to me. Worth noting, at large, the size of a food actively does have an impact here in that larger foods need more shots for you to grab them outright. Hence why that bomb technically didn't get registered to me, because I needed to hit at least another time for it to count. This one is just not for me, really. I think the higher the difficulty goes, bombs appear more often, and I think Doc shoots out his shots more often. Next up is the boss endurance mode. This is effectively the arena, where you get to go through the copy ability arena, and then are forced to go through the boss fights in the order you encounter them in the main story. With that said, because you have access to the copy museum, and you know the bosses ahead of time, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be coming into. Worth noting, though, you only get, I think, one healing item for the entire round, so you need to really make sure you pick and choose when to use it. My personal recommendation is to have abilities you know are useful against multiple bosses, like Sword, like Cutter, like High Jump, UFO, but also worth noting the Triple Star Rod is over here, and this is especially going to be very useful for you. How about we do a good old boss rush sequence? congratulations! I've always found the end of that specific arena kind of funny because you actively do have to go through the chase sequence for Dark Nebula as well, and there's healing items placed along that route. So if you get all the way to Dark Nebula, you're probably going to be in really good shape. But with that, I'm going to need to end this LP off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. We'll see Kirby again at some other point for either Kirby 64 or Canvas Curse before moving on to the 2.5D quote-unquote modern era, I say, considering I think Return to Dreamland's upwards of, what, 15 plus years old at this point. As for our next LP, well, I did just mention the N64, and there's a specific platformer there that I have a lot to talk about with, so I'd say we should go do that next. See you guys then.